Welcome to Legacy Sips and Tips podcast with your geeky host, Lindsay Wheeler, where we talk about everything from death, preparing for your future through estate planning, life, the occasional breakup, entrepreneurship, general nerdery, and of course travel, snowboard, and always wine. Welcome to Legacy Sips and Tips with your host, Lindsay, and today we're going to talk about same-sex marriages and estate planning. So let's get into that. In light of the recent election results, which some people are very happy about, other people are very not happy about that. Same-sex relationships, we all have to kind of maybe have a discussion about that these days because we never thought that Roe versus Wade was going to be overturned, but here we are, and especially in light with the makeup at the Supreme Court and the fact that potentially two more are going to be changed, if you will, that we need to kind of think about these things. So a little bit of history, of course, that it wasn't until 2003, let that sink in here, kids, 2003, that the Supreme Court in Lawrence versus Texas struck down laws criminalizing same-sex relationships. That is not that long ago, 2003. I had already graduated college at that point, okay, but I'm also old. And then, of course, it wasn't until 2015, which is also not that long ago, that in the Hodges decision that the same-sex marriage was now federally recognized. Okay, so these are things that are very recent, that as we know, things that are less entrenched in the law or in practice can be potentially overturned or changed. And in light of recent events, that might be a strong possibility. You know, that may not happen, but again, who knows these days? We could be living in an apocalyptic hellscape tomorrow. Yeah. So again, if you are old enough to remember, or not that old enough to remember, same-sex relationships had huge issues with legality and with the law and with ways that society viewed them and viewed their rights. Obviously, that's an issue. Okay. So this was very impactful in the sense of estate planning and advocating for their partner. So the horrible story you think about this, or the scenario, is that you have been with somebody for 40 plus years. This is your life partner. This is the person you've been with your whole life. This is your person, right? 40 years. You're in a same-sex relationship. You're not married at that point, or maybe that marriage designation got overturned. And so what does that look like? What if that person gets sick? What used to happen, and this was horrible, is that you could have been with that person for 40 years and that person has to go into the hospital and you were not able to be there for them. You're not next of kin and you're not family and you're not married, right? You could be with that person for 40 years, again, and not be able to advocate for their medical wishes. You would not even be able to be in the room with them. That is a reality that many, many people have experienced, and that is horrible and heartbreaking. And the way that we kind of circumvent that is through that estate planning. This is why estate planning is super important, especially for right now, is making sure that if the federal designation of same-sex marriages being recognized is overturned or changed, you have that estate plan in place so that person can still be your advocate. They can still be your person. They can still inherit from you. Because again, think about that. You've been with this person for 40 years. They then pass away, you would have no right to their estate if they didn't have anything in place, because intestate succession does not provide for you, honestly. And that's what really sucks. You're not married to them, you are not related to them, and there's no way for it to go to you. So you will be out of luck for a relationship that you have been in for 40 years, okay? So really let that sink in. I know that we like to think on our rainbows and puppies and golden butterflies, but the reality of things is that things are not maybe going to be where we want them to be, or maybe they will be. Maybe things will just be fine and everything will be great, and I hope that's the case. But if not, let's do a little pre-planning. Again, we don't expect the airplane to go down, but we really want that safety briefing to be told. This is exactly what estate planning is. It is your safety briefing on the airplane, and when it goes down, I want to know where the safety life vest is, right? So super important that these things are not even becoming law or haven't become law very long ago. Again, 2015 was when that was recognized, okay? So always think about that and keep that in mind. Again, having this in place, having that done is very important, that if that does go away, you still have that estate plan. You still have that person on there. You're still able to provide for them if you're incapacitated, Or if you are passing away or have passed away, that your stuff goes to your partner or to basically your spouse at that point if that gets turned over. It's your spouse now, but if that goes away, they're no longer your spouse. So you can make sure that they're still protected, they're still taken care of in the event that you're no longer here. Very, very important, again, with those powers of attorney, being able to financially advocate for them, taking care of your mortgage. What if you have a mortgage together? What if you live in a house? You have shared bills. This is your person. This is your partner, right? You're in a partnership. You're in a marriage. If that gets overturned, that now becomes your roommate, especially, at that point. Just think of it that way. That person's no longer your spouse. They're now your roommate. Crazy, right? That we even have to think about this, but here we are. So getting that in place, making sure that that's taken care of is really, really important. Also, like I talk about, is that medical power of attorney. Super important that if your person is in an accident, they're in the hospital, they become infirm, they have that dementia, whatever it is, that you're able to still advocate and be there for your person. That power of attorney will override all of that because you've given that person that ability to make sure that they can take care of you, right? Another thing that you guys need to think about that's super important is that guardianship nomination for your kids. Obviously, same-sex relationships have children. Yes, this is a real reality, everyone. What happens if you were not available to take care of those kids, or maybe your marriage designation gets overturned? What happens to your kids? It's like you had a child with a roommate. I know that's the other parent, but who knows what's going to happen. So making sure that estate plan is in place for not only your partner, but also for your children, that guardianship nomination, making sure that if you're on the birth certificate and your other partner is not or is unable to be on the birth certificate for some unknown reason, that something gets changed, that you're still able to have your children. Those are your kids, right? Making sure that guardianship nomination is listed on there. So if something were to happen to your spouse or your partner, at that point, your roommate, that your children go with you and not maybe their crazy auntie or uncle who they didn't like anyways, right? So these are things that we have to think about. We have to kind of think about outside the box that these things may or potentially would happen. I really, really hope they're not going to, and I don't think they are, but we have to be proactive in thinking about these things. So if you have questions on that or getting your estate plan set up in this situation, please let me know. I'm very happy to get this done for people, and frankly, at this point, I think everybody should have this done and in place. So today's wine talk is a label that got messed up in my thing, but it's a Ferrari Carano 2022 Fume Blanc. This is a really cool wine here because this is from our local area in really a weird roundabout way. This is from the Ferrari Carano family who owned the local casino here, who ended up being winemakers for basically making wine for their casino. This is a really nice wine. Everybody loves this wine. Everybody around this area knows the Fume Blanc, and it's usually their favorite. So it's a Sauvignon Blanc that's perfectly pairs with luscious ripe peaches and pears with the crisp freshness of lemon, grapefruit, and orange blossom, which is correct. This is a really nice wine. It's a very standard wine. Good price point if you want to bring this for a picnic or for the holidays. It's a really, really nice wine. Don't mind the label there. Try our local, not local wine here from Ferrari Carano. So to wrap up, we're in a political climate, a societal climate right now that might be a little uncertain. It might be a little scary. I don't think anything's going to change, but I have been wrong in the past before, especially with some definitely types of very firm case law that we thought were always going to be there, that got changed. And so this one I know is on the agenda of a lot of politicians to have same-sex marriages not recognized. And they want to change constitutions and state constitutions to recognize that it is not available anymore. And again, this was only since 2015 that this was available. So the way to kind of circumvent that, to make sure that your relationships still stay strong, stay where they are, and have that legal ability to still advocate for your partner, whether you're married or not, is through that estate plan, making sure that you have those things in place. And at the very, very minimum, just getting powers of attorney documents in place to make sure that you're still able to advocate for each other. So thank you so much for joining me today, talking about same-sex marriage and the potential of that being changed or overturned, and how do we kind of avoid the fallout, if you will, from those changes happening, and how we can make sure that we are all still protected with our loved ones and our people through that estate planning process, whether those protections or case law gets overturned or changed. If you have questions more about that, or like to talk about politics and the apocalyptic hellscape that we might be going into, I would love to chit chat about that. Just kidding. I love you all. And of course, when you think of death, think of me. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you found value, please like, subscribe, and share. And be sure to follow me on all the socials at Sips and Tips with Lindsay. And of course, you can always go to my website, sipsandtipswithlindsay.com, to find more information about estate planning, business, snowboard, travel, and of course, wine. As always, we have to get the legal stuff out of the way. I went to law school, so you don't have to. However, we have to read the special disclaimer that I am not a practicing attorney, I am not your attorney, I am not offering any legal advice in any content or any episode. All content is for your information and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for seeking your own legal advice from your own attorney or other professionals such as a CPA or financial advisor. I cannot give legal advice and do not offer any legal services or legal advice, but I do offer some fun and educational content for you to enjoy.